Welcome to Heartfelt Tales, where stories don't just unfold, they explode onto your screen with raw emotion, gripping drama, and truths that hit harder than a front-page headline. I'm your host, and today, we're diving headfirst into a tale so electrifying, so packed with twists and revelations, that you'll be on the edge of your seat from the first second to the last. This isn't just a video, it's a roller coaster of information, a deep dive into a saga that demands your full attention. Trust me, you'll want to watch every single moment to catch the whole story, because missing even a beat could leave you in the dark. Picture this, a young woman facing a ruthless political titan, a battle of wits in a congressional showdown, and a fight for truth that could shake the foundations of power. It's all coming your way, right now. So, if you're ready for a story that'll leave your heart pounding and your mind racing, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think this tale is all about before we begin. Let's get into it. This is Heartfelt Tales, and you won't believe what's coming next. Scene 1, Introduction of Sarah Miller. In a small office with dim lighting, Sarah Miller sat amidst a towering stack of paperwork, her sharp eyes scanning each line of text. The room was quiet, with only the sound of pages turning and her steady breathing, as if each breath was a countdown to her upcoming testimony in Congress. Though only 32 years old, Sarah carried herself with the poise of someone far more experienced. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her thin-framed glasses slid down her nose as she tilted her head to read an old memo from the Trump administration. This was not her first time preparing for a battle of words, but this time, she knew it would be a greater challenge than ever before. Sarah grew up in a small town in Ohio, where the American dream was not just a slogan but a guiding principle in her life. Her father was a factory worker, her mother a primary school teacher, both of whom taught her the value of hard work and integrity. From a young age, Sarah stood out for her sharp analytical skills and argumentative prowess. She graduated summa cum laude with a degree in political science from Georgetown University and later won a full scholarship to Harvard Law School. However, instead of pursuing a lucrative legal career on Wall Street, Sarah chose to work in public service. To her, politics was not a game of power, but a way to change the lives of people like her parents. While working in the Trump administration, Sarah was one of the youngest policy advisors. She wasn't loud or flashy, on the contrary, she worked quietly behind the scenes, drafting policies on education and healthcare that she believed would create long-term benefits. Despite the controversy surrounding that administration, Sarah never wavered in her belief that she could make a difference from within. Her colleagues remembered her as tireless, often staying up until 2 a.m. to finish reports, or spending hours debating with experts to defend her positions. Now, sitting in her office, Sarah prepared for the upcoming testimony with remarkable precision. In front of her were dozens of files, reports, data, and notes from her time at the White House. She knew that every question, every attack in this hearing would focus on her time under the previous administration. But Sarah was not afraid. She was ready, not only with her extensive knowledge of policy but with the resolve of someone who truly believed in her ideals. Her fingers glided over a final note, and then she smiled faintly. "They won't take me down so easily," she murmured to herself, before turning off the lights and leaving the office. Scene 2, Introduction of Senator Robert Brown. In the Senate meeting room, Senator Robert Brown stood in front of his desk, his cold eyes staring into the empty space. He was about 50 years old, but his serious demeanor and decisiveness made him seem older than his years. His suit was impeccably tailored, but no one noticed. They were all captivated by the overwhelming presence he exuded. Around him, his team of assistants rushed, exchanging last-minute notes on the strategy for the upcoming hearing. A young assistant, holding an iPad, read aloud a brief about Sarah Miller. Robert raised his hand to signal them to stop, his voice deep but commanding. "I don't need a biography. I want to know her weaknesses." Robert Brown was an ambitious politician, one who wasn't afraid to step on anyone to achieve his goals. He had spent over 2 decades in politics, rising from the city council to the United States Senate. To him, politics was a battle, and he always played to win. He was infamous for his ruthlessness in hearings, often leaving witnesses stammering or exiting the room pale-faced. But behind that tough exterior was a man full of contradictions. Robert grew up in poverty, witnessing his father lose his job due to policies he considered failures of the federal government. This had fueled a fire within him, both a drive to succeed and a bitterness towards those he considered the enemy. Robert had a history of fierce opposition to the Trump administration. He had publicly criticized Trump's policies as irresponsible and serving personal interests. But there was something deeper in his animosity. Some speculated it was a personal grudge against a senior figure from the old administration, though no one knew exactly who. With Sarah Miller, Robert saw an opportunity to strike a powerful blow against Trump's legacy. He turned to his team, slamming his hand on the table. "She's a Trump person. I want every dark corner of her record exposed. No mercy." The team nodded, quickly assigning tasks. Robert sat down, his eyes never leaving the plan before him. He knew this hearing wasn't just an interrogation, it was a political battle, and he was ready to win at any cost. Scene 3, brief scene at Trump's post-White House office. In an elegant office in Florida, former President Donald Trump sat in a leather chair, phone in hand. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting a warm glow on his face, confident yet bearing a rare hint of anxiety. On the other end of the line was Sarah Miller, the one person he always trusted in crucial moments. "Sarah, you know they'll attack you, right?" Trump's voice boomed, strong yet tinged with sarcasm. "They're nothing but attack dogs, always looking to tear apart anyone who worked with me." Trump paused for a moment, as if weighing his words. He had heard about the hearing through his own sources, and despite no longer being in the White House, he was still closely watching every move related to those who had been loyal to him. With Sarah, he had a special respect, not only because she was smart, but because she never backed down under pressure. "Listen to me," he continued, his tone growing more serious, "you've got to be smart, tough, and win. Don't let them corner you. You're mine, and I don't pick losers." On the other end of the line, Sarah smiled softly, feeling the trust from her former leader. Trump hung up the phone, gazing out the window with a contemplative look. He knew Sarah had the talent, but he also understood the cost of standing by him in such a hostile political world. "She'll be fine," he murmured, almost to reassure himself. Scene 4, Introduction of Congressman Davis and Congresswoman Green. In another corner of Washington, D.C., Congressman James Davis sat in his office, flipping through the pages of documents about Sarah Miller. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair, but his eyes still burned with passion. Davis was a conservative politician, firmly believing in the values of order and personal responsibility. He wasn't a fan of the Trump administration, but he respected those who worked for their ideals, even if he didn't always agree with them. For this hearing, Davis wanted to ensure that everything was fair, not the witch hunt that he feared it might become. A few buildings away, Congresswoman Laura Green reviewed her notes under the light of her desk lamp. She was younger than Davis, with a dynamic presence and a voice full of persuasion. As a progressive, Green often clashed with Davis during debates, but they shared one common ground, a commitment to integrity and fair discussion. She didn't care for the Trump administration either, but she didn't want the hearing to turn into a personal vendetta. For her, the truth mattered more than any political calculation. Both Davis and Green were preparing for the hearing with intense focus. They didn't know it yet, but despite their ideological differences, they would soon play pivotal roles in shaping the outcome of the coming political battle. Before them, the image of Sarah Miller loomed in their minds, a young, talented woman, but also the center of the approaching political storm. Scene 5, the hearing begins. The congressional hearing room was packed with people. The light from the large chandeliers illuminated the long rows of seats, where reporters, government staff, and the public crowded together to witness this highly anticipated event. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, as if everyone knew this wasn't just a regular Q&A session but a tense political confrontation. TV cameras were placed everywhere, their lenses pointing directly at the witness table where Sarah Miller stood. She wore a simple yet elegant gray suit, her hands lightly resting on the pile of documents before her, her gaze calm but not without a hint of vigilance. In front of her sat the rows of senators and Congress members, the ones who would decide her fate today. Senator Robert Brown sat at the center, his shoulders slightly raised, his cold eyes like a hawk watching its prey. Beside him, other members of the committee, from hardline conservatives to progressives, wore expressions of skepticism or indifference. Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the opening statement she had rehearsed for many nights. Members of the committee, her voice rang out, clear and composed, I am honored to be here today to answer questions related to my work in the previous administration. I have always committed to serving the public with transparency and accountability. She barely got the sentence out before Senator Brown interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. Ms. Miller, I don't need to hear your hollow words about serving the public. We're here to uncover the truth, not to listen to you praise yourself. A murmur spread through the crowd, and a few reporters bent down to take quick notes. Sarah paused for a moment but quickly regained her composure, nodding slightly as if accepting the challenge. The atmosphere in the room immediately grew more tense, like a fire that had just been ignited. Scene 6, Senator Brown's brutal attack. Senator Brown leaned forward, his hands clasped together, his gaze never leaving Sarah. He held a sheet of paper in his hand, an old report from her time at the White House, and began to question her. Ms. Miller, explain this decision to me, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. On March 15, 2019, you approved a healthcare policy proposal that was later criticized for benefiting large insurance companies. Do you think that serves the public? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but he didn't give her a chance. And don't tell me it was just a minor detail. This is taxpayer money, Ms. Miller. Do you know how many families were affected by policies like this? He emphasized each word as if every question was a dagger aimed at her. Sarah remained calm, her voice still composed. Senator, I'd be happy to explain. That proposal was made in the context of our efforts to balance expanding healthcare coverage with keeping costs reasonable. If I could present the full data. But Brown interrupted her again, this time with a mocking smile. Balance? That sounds more like an excuse for incompetence than an explanation. He continued to dig through every detail of Sarah's record, from internal emails to meetings she attended. He intentionally twisted the meaning of what she said, turning complex decisions into evidence for a narrative he had already set, that Sarah was an irresponsible bureaucrat, merely following orders from higher-ups without regard for the consequences. His questions were full of attacks, leading ones, like, did you just follow Trump's orders without questioning them, or, do you feel ashamed looking back at what you did? Sarah tried to respond, but each time she began to explain, Brown cut her off, shattering her words into pieces. The crowd in the room began to stir, some shaking their heads, others whispering to each other. The pressure weighed heavily on Sarah's shoulders, but she stood firm, her gaze unwavering.